Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. China's debt crisis is back in the news. We're talking about trillions of dollars in debt. Debt that China has given to other countries and debt that Chinese cities find themselves buried under. And China will have to solve this debt problem if it wants to revive its economy. How big is the challenge and what does China propose to do to fix it? That's what we'll discuss tonight on Vantage. We're also talking about the developments in Scotland. They'll have a new First Minister, a man of Pakistani origin. And the UK already has an Indian origin Prime Minister. Ireland has an Indian origin Prime Minister. We're talking about the rise of the quote-unquote natives and how there's every possibility of a Pakistani origin leader sitting across an Indian origin Prime Minister to discuss the partition of Scotland from the UK. Russia is giving cyber weapons to Iran. What does it mean for the region and for US security challenges vis-a-vis Iran? We'll discuss that, bringing you a special report. Pakistan is facing a dangerous shortage of life-saving drugs. This is tied in to the collapsing economy of the country. And finally, would you like to experience what death is like before you die? Virtual reality is giving an option, and apparently there are many takers. We'll discuss what this means. The headlines first. Bibi backs down. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hits the pause button on his controversial judicial reform. The U-turn comes just days after he sacked his defense minister but could not quell the protests. India blocks the Twitter account of BBC Punjabi, reportedly over their misleading coverage of the situation in Punjab. Punjab police have failed to nab Khalistani separatist leader Amritpal Singh. The manhunt has been on for more than 10 days. Will Pakistani judges bankroll their democracy? The Chief Justice of Pakistan proposes a pay cut for himself and other judges. He says it will help in funding elections across the country. Elections to be held in Greece on the 21st of May. The Prime Minister was under fire for delaying the announcement. He's on the back foot over the train tragedy last month that killed 57 people. And Chinese tech giant Alibaba will split into 6 business groups. The revamp comes just a day after its founder, Jack Ma, made an appearance in China. He's been missing from the public eye for months. Tonight, we'll talk about China's debt crisis. It is ruining countries, and it's hurting China too. In a nutshell, this is what happened. China went around the world pumping money into economies that were not robust. The idea was to buy their loyalty. In some cases it worked, but in many more, the money sank. Now the countries cannot pay back, and China needs the cash because its own cities are sinking under debt. We're talking about trillions of dollars here, unsustainable loans, money that China wants to recover but is failing to. This story has 3 parts. Number 1, the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, the centerpiece of Xi Jinping's foreign policy, also a weapon for the Chinese state to extend its debt trap. Well, that weapon has backfired. Belt and Road is now Belt and Road blocks. The projects are stuck because partner countries are not being able to manage their debt. So China has been forced to give out bailouts, and it's not working out for either side. Let me show you some numbers. From the year 2000 to 2021, China gave 128 bailouts. These were in 22 countries, 128 bailouts. The total value was $240 billion. And most of this was thanks to BRI. A large chunk of these bailouts were given only after 2017. BRI began in 2013. Between 2019 and 2021, China gave bailouts worth $104 billion. So the trend is quite clear. China's bad loans multiplied thanks to Belt and Road projects. Now look at the countries that got these loans. Argentina, Belarus, Ecuador, Egypt, Laos, Mongolia, Pakistan, Suriname, Sri Lanka, Turkey, Ukraine and Venezuela. In terms of geography, China has covered a lot. These countries may be in different continents, but they have 2 things in common. 1, they all got Chinese loans. And 2, they all got IMF loans. IMF is the International Monetary Fund, the lender of last resort. What do these similarities tell you? China is exploiting developing economies. It is piling them with more debt. And it gives money even when the risks are clear. A bank might not lend to some of these countries. That's because they may not be able to service their debt. But China throws its checkbook at them. Then they default. They're not able to pay. In some cases, China lends them more cash. In other cases, it extends the tenure of the loans, essentially kicking the can down the road. Either way, these economies are saddled with debt. I'll give you two examples, Sri Lanka and Zambia. This is part 2 of our story. Sri Lanka got an IMF bailout recently. Now it has to restructure its debt, which means all lenders will have to take a haircut. The lenders will have to give up on some of their money. But China does not like the idea. So it hasn't joined the restructuring plan yet. 1 year into Sri Lanka's suffering, China has just agreed to discuss the plan. And how much money are we talking about? How much money does Sri Lanka owe to China? $7.4 billion. This was till the end of 2022. Then we have Zambia, the same story. The country is buried under a giant pile of Chinese debt worth $6 billion. This was till the end of 2021. Just like Sri Lanka, Zambia needs an IMF bailout, and just like with Sri Lanka, China is coming in the way. Zambia has to restructure its debt, but China is imposing new conditions. Last month, China said the World Bank should be included in the process. Zambia's finance minister was furious. This is what he said, and I'm quoting, "Discussions at high levels like those just make our situation worse, because what we're looking for is urgent solutions, not discussions that may drag out the matter." He was clearly referring to China here. So Beijing is the villain in Zambia's story. It is also the villain in Sri Lanka's story, and it knows this. Then why does it not give debt relief to these countries? Because that would mean loss of money and face. And China can afford neither. China is the largest bilateral creditor in the world. As of 2020, China has lent about $1.5 trillion, and this money has gone to more than 150 countries. Imagine having to wave off $1.5 trillion in loans. And I must say this here, not all countries want a waiver at this point, but if you make an exception for some, others may expect it. So this is about setting precedent and setting expectations. And China cannot afford it because its own cities are buried under debt. That's the third part of our story. The local governments in China are in urgent need of cash. They have a massive debt pile. And when I say massive, I mean something to the tune of $5 trillion. You heard that right, $5 trillion. In 2022, local governments in China had loans worth more than $5 trillion. Now they're looking for new ways to raise cash. And new loans are out of question because Beijing has issued strict orders. Listen to this. We should prevent a buildup of new debts while working to reduce existing ones. Yes, they should. The question is, how? You cannot export your way out of this. China cannot revive its economy without fixing its debt problem, and it's the top focus of the government right now. They're approaching 2023, or whatever is left of the year, as the year to ensure the revival of the Chinese economy. Xi Jinping has appointed a new premier. His KRA, or Key Responsibility Area, is to bring China's economy back on track. Because this debt pile is like a house of cards. One wrong move, one bad decision, and it will all come crashing down. Our next story is about Humza Yousaf, the new leader of the Scottish National Party. He will replace Nicola Sturgeon as the First Minister of Scotland. This was the moment when he made history.
I therefore declare Humza Yousaf duly elected as the Scottish National Party leader. Congratulations, Humza. And I now invite you up to say a few words.
He's all of 37 years old, the youngest person and the first Muslim to lead Scotland. The poignancy of the moment was not lost on him and his family. Humza Yousaf is the son of a Pakistani immigrant. His father moved to Glasgow in the 1960s. His grandfather, who used to work in a sewing factory, barely spoke English when he arrived in Scotland. And today, Yousaf will lead Scotland and its struggle for independence. On the other side of the negotiating table will be this man, Rishi Sunak, the Indian origin Prime Minister of the UK. And we're just getting started. The Mayor of London is Sadiq Khan, also the son of Pakistani immigrants. So the three most powerful people in the UK today trace their roots to the erstwhile British Raj. The most prominent British person today, who is not of colour, is probably King Charles. And you know you're on thin ice when you have to depend on Charles to make your case. Then we have neighbouring Ireland, again led by an Indian origin Prime Minister. His name is Leo Varadkar. And this is the rise of the natives, the same people who were once called rogues and rascals. These were the words of one of Britain's most celebrated Prime Ministers, Winston Churchill. He called Indians rogues and rascals. This was back in 1947 when he argued against India's independence. Churchill said, and I quote, "If independence is granted to India, power will go to the hands of rascals, rogues, freebooters. All Indian leaders will be of low caliber and men of straw." But Churchill and the might of British imperialism could not stop an idea whose time had come, the idea of an independent India. And the much-fated British politician could not have been more wrong. Churchill made his bigoted comment in 1947. In 2022, these so-called low-caliber men of straw led India to overtake the United Kingdom to become the fifth largest economy in the world. So we say to Winston Churchill, we did just fine. But Britain, perhaps, had such a dearth of caliber that it had to import its leaders and its hot-footing to its former colonies to fill the void. How delicious is the irony. It's no surprise that social media cannot keep calm. The meme floodgates have opened. On a more serious note, the possible partition of the UK, with Scotland seeking to break away, could very well be brokered by two persons of colour, one of Indian origin and the other of Pakistani origin. Scottish independence is top of Yousaf's agenda. He made that clear in his victory speech.
And my solemn promise and commitment to you is that I will kickstart our grassroots, our civic-led movement, and ensure our drive for independence is in fifth gear. The people of Scotland need independence now more than ever before, and we will be the generation that delivers independence for Scotland.
According to a local poll, about 4 in every 10 people in Scotland support independence. Of course, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is less enthusiastic about it. He rejected the call for another Scottish referendum on independence. But his spokesperson said that Sunak is, quote-unquote, looking forward to working with Yousaf. Last year, the UK Supreme Court passed an order. It said that the Scottish government cannot hold an independence referendum. The last one was held in September 2014. 55% of the voters wanted to remain with the UK. So the task is cut out for the newly minted Scottish First Minister. And while the subcontinent rejoices in the rise of another one of its sons, the road ahead for Yousaf is far from cheerful. In 2016, he wore a gold-embroidered sherwani and a kilt when he took oath in the Scottish Parliament. But now, as the First Minister of Scotland, he will have to deliver beyond the optics, because the struggle for independence is a long and arduous process, and the British have a proclivity for power. Just ask India. A new military partnership is taking shape in West Asia, and the West won't like it. We're talking about Russia and Iran. What do they have in common? Western enemies. It's a partnership of convenience, you could say. Both Iran and Russia face Western sanctions, so they're working together. Last year, Iran armed the Russian military. Iranian drones were used in the war in Ukraine. And now they're taking it to the next level. Russia is giving Iran cyber weapons. Reports say Moscow is sharing cyber warfare capabilities. This is an exchange of Iranian military supplies. Russia has provided cutting-edge technology to Iran. This includes eavesdropping devices, advanced photography devices, and lie detectors. One report says Moscow could have also shared advanced software with Iran. This is software to hack phones and systems. It can be used against dissidents and adversaries. What else is Iran getting from the Russians? Internet censorship software. The term is self-explanatory. Reports say this software can monitor, intercept, degrade, and even deny mobile communications to all Iranians. This can be a powerful tool in the hands of the regime. Just look at the recent events. Last year, Iran witnessed massive protests. It was the most serious challenge to the regime yet. It started with the death of Masha Amini, a 22-year-old woman. She died in the custody of the morality police. Amini's death led to a nationwide uprising. Tehran responded with a fierce crackdown. All communication networks were blocked. The state came down hard on the protesters. Some 500 people are said to have died. More than 19,000 were arrested. So the new gear from Russia could enhance the regime's surveillance power. These capabilities can also be deployed against the West, specifically the United States. And cyber weapons could just be the beginning. Iran is looking to get more lethal Russian supplies. I'm talking about advanced military fighter jets, helicopters, and air defense systems. Russia is said to be working on these plans, and this could have ramifications well beyond Ukraine. With Russian military equipment, Iran could change the security dynamics in West Asia. Russian arms could protect Iran's nuclear program and nuclear sites that are often a target of Israel. Iran can become a more dangerous power in the region. This poses a direct security challenge to the US, and the world was recently reminded of these risks. American bases in the region were targeted. They were hit by drone strikes, engineered apparently by Tehran. A US contractor was killed. 5 US service members were injured. In response, the US conducted retaliatory airstrikes. President Biden had this warning for Tehran.
The Iranian-backed militant groups used an unmanned aerial vehicle to strike one of our facilities, causing several American casualties. Make no mistake, the United States does not emphasize seek conflict with Iran, but be prepared for us to act forcefully, protect our people.
But warnings will not be enough. With Russia's support, Iran's military power will get a serious upgrade. Iran and Russia are also planning to set up a drone factory. It will be based in Russia. Once ready, the facility will produce at least 6,000 drones. The plan is to upgrade the Shahed 136. It's the same drone that is being used in Ukraine. Russia and Iran want to upgrade it. The new drone will have a better engine, we're told. It will fly faster and farther. Once ready, the same drone could also end up in Ukraine or in Tehran. Either way, the West needs to prepare for the fallout. It will face a bigger security challenge on 2 fronts. And now let's talk about what's happening on the front lines. There's a lot to unpack. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was in Zaporizhia. Russia fired supersonic anti-ship missiles in the Sea of Japan. The United Nations Security Council refused to probe the Nord Stream pipeline blasts, and NATO tanks have started rolling into Ukraine. Let's start with Zaporizhia. The town is home to Europe's largest nuclear power plant. It is located about 50 kilometers away from the main city. While the city is in Ukrainian hands, the plant is not. Russia has controlled the plant since the beginning of this war. President Zelensky met the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi. He inspected the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. It's part of his role as a global nuclear watchdog chief. After the check, he met with Zelensky, and this is what he said.
This is my 7th trip to your country since the war started, which is also an indication of my deep commitment for as long as it takes, as all your friends around the world tell you. Modestly, we are trying to do the same. So, the situation, of course, at the plant is not getting any better. Naturally, because the military activity is increasing.
The activity he's talking about is the constant shelling of the nuclear plant by the Russians. The city faces regular attacks. Power supply to the nuclear plant has been cut many times, and this is very dangerous. Nuclear reactors need power to cool down. If they don't get it, there could be a nuclear disaster. The plant could become another Chernobyl. Zelensky keeps raising the threat. He says Russia must be forced to leave and that all of Europe is in danger. But right now, it's Japan that is feeling the danger. Russia is conducting naval drills in the Sea of Japan. It test-fired supersonic anti-ship missiles. They were fired at a mock target about 100 kilometers away. Russia says the test was a success. Well, it also succeeded in pushing Japan on the edge.
We are aware that the Russian Ministry of Defense announced on March 28th that missile ships of the Pacific Fleet conducted cruise missile launch training in the Sea of Japan. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues, Russian forces are also becoming more active in the Far East, including Japan's vicinities. The Japanese government will continue to monitor these movements of the Russian military.
Russia's test could be a routine drill, or it could have been a warning to the West. You see, two events have taken place that could have upset Russia. The first was at the United Nations. Russia moved a resolution. It wanted a probe into the Nord Stream sabotage. Gas pipelines. They came under attack last year. They were essential to Russia's business interests in Europe. There was a blast in September. Russia blames the West for it. It wanted a United Nations-led investigation, but Russia's resolution failed. The West abstained, and it only shows them in poor light. Why resist an investigation if they had no role in the blast? But as things stand, the United Nations will not be investigating, and Russia says it will keep calling for a probe. The other thing that may have irked Russia is that NATO tanks have arrived in Ukraine. This is a video of the UK's Challenger 2 tanks. Ukraine's defense minister seems quite excited about it.
It's marvelous when Secretary of Defense of the United Kingdom. It's a very good stuff. Thank you very much from Ukraine to United Kingdom.
The German Leopard 2 tanks have also arrived. Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced this in a rather roundabout way.
We stand by Ukraine, which we support politically, financially, but also with arms deliveries and especially with the military training that both our countries provide. Germany and the Netherlands have jointly delivered armored infantry fighting vehicles and ammunition, and are currently preparing, together with Denmark, the delivery of Leopard 1 main battle tanks to support Ukraine in this way as well, in addition to all the other tanks that we deliver, including the very modern ones that we have just delivered.
The answer to your question is yes, we delivered Leopard tanks as we announced.
Remember, a few months ago, the West was furiously debating about sending tanks to Kiev. They were worried it would be escalating the conflict, crossing one of Moscow's red lines. But now that line has been crossed, and jets seem to be next on the West's agenda. So the war looks set to continue escalating. Both sides are upping the ante, and we here in the rest of the world will continue to deal with the fallout. Have you heard of the book Sophie's Choice? It is set during the Second World War. The character Sophie has a very difficult choice in it. One of her two children will be gassed, and she has to pick which one. The term Sophie's Choice has come to be used to describe such situations when you have to make an extremely difficult decision and when one outcome is not better than the other. Why are we talking about Sophie's Choice tonight? To fully comprehend Pakistan's predicament. Pakistan faces a similar choice as we speak. Should the government save lives or save the country? Should it help people who are dying or help the economy which is collapsing, which will then lead to more misery for the same people? The immediate crisis is this. There is a dangerous shortage of medicines in Pakistan. Many lives are at stake, but Pakistan does not have the money to pay for those medicines. That's because it is trying to avoid bankruptcy and not importing life-saving drugs. The crisis began in January, but now matters have come to a head. The import of drugs has been cut drastically in Pakistan. There are about 100 crucial medicines that Pakistanis need. They include drugs like general anesthesia, vaccines, cancer therapies, fertility drugs, and more. Last month, there was a shortage of basic drugs like insulin and Disprin, which is a medicine for headaches. And now the situation has become worse. At the same time, Pakistan is struggling to keep its economy afloat. It needs to shore up its finances, and that cannot happen without an IMF bailout. That's one part of the problem. Here's the second part. Islamabad is caught in a dispute with the pharma industry. The industry wants to jack up prices of drugs by at least 38%. And they have good reason to ask for this, a 38% price hike. Their first problem is inflation. Prices of raw materials have gone up significantly, so prices of drugs have to be adjusted accordingly. Their second problem is the Pakistani rupee's value. It continues to fall. Today, $1 is worth around 284 Pakistani rupees. That's very bad news for Pakistan's pharma industry. It depends heavily on imports. It gets most of its raw materials from outside. 95% of the raw materials used in medicines in Pakistan are imported from countries like India and China. So when the Pakistani rupee falls, these imports become more expensive. So inflation at home and higher costs of imports are squeezing the pharma industry. Many companies have stopped importing essential drugs. The industry faces a risk of collapse. The Pharma Manufacturers Association of Pakistan has spoken out. I have a quote from their chairman. Listen to what he said. The local pharmaceutical industry is on the verge of collapse because of no corresponding adjustment in pricing, despite a 60% increase in materials' cost in recent years. What is Islamabad's response? They have rejected these demands, and now some companies could be forced to give up. 3 weeks back, the pharma industry issued a warning. It said dozens of companies will be forced to shut down. Drug production has already dropped by more than 20%. Banks are no longer funding these companies. And guess who is paying the price of all of this? The patients. They're desperate. Many are resorting to smuggled drugs. These are obviously expensive, more expensive, but some of them could also be dangerous. There is a high risk of counterfeiting. And there's a large number of people who cannot afford to buy from the black market. What happens to them? The government of Pakistan has no answers. The crisis is fundamentally about the shortage of dollars and Pakistan's weak foreign reserves. Reports say Pakistan has just about $4.5 billion in forex reserves. The money may not last for even a month. And this is the choice that Islamabad faces today. If it uses the existing reserves to ease the supply of medicines, the country will be bankrupt. Like I said, there are no easy choices. What about the IMF bailout? So far, Pakistan has been unsuccessful in securing one. Islamabad needs $1.1 billion from the IMF immediately. But it's not been able to prove its creditworthiness. Also, there's no telling where the money will end up, even if Pakistan gets it. So as the wait continues, the lives of tens of thousands of patients hangs in the balance. The big headline from the US is this: another mass shooting, this too in a school, an elementary school in Nashville, Tennessee. 6 people were killed, 3 children and 3 adults. Let me repeat that. 3 more children have died to America's gun terror. The attacker was a former student of the same school. She was carrying 3 guns, including a semi-automatic rifle. She was shot dead by the police. Her motives are still being investigated, while American politicians are busy repeating what they say after every such shooting. This is President Joe Biden.
I just want to speak very briefly about the school shooting in Nashville, Tennessee. You know, Ben and I have been doing this our whole careers, it seems. And it's just, it's sick. You know, we're still gathering the facts of what happened and why. And we do know that as of now, there are a number of people who are did not make it, including children. We're monitoring the situation really closely, Ben, as you know. And we have to do more to stop gun violence. It's ripping our communities apart, ripping the soul of this nation, ripping at the very soul of the nation.
Gun violence is ripping apart the soul of the nation. Biden's saying the right things, but where is the action? Why can't his administration do anything about the violence? Why are guns the leading cause of death in the country? Why were there 89 school shooting incidents this year alone, 89 in the first 3 months of this year? The US is a country where you're more likely to get killed by a teenager than a terrorist. And in this situation, there's a clear villain, the US gun lobby, the NRA and their venomous ilk. They cite the US Second Amendment to stop any action to regulate guns. The Second Amendment protects an American citizen's right to bear arms. It is a byproduct of how the country was founded, through bloodshed. First by European colonizers, then by the Americans fighting off the British. It makes you wonder about Biden's words. Is gun violence really ripping apart the soul of the nation, or is the gun violence just the nation's soul manifesting itself? Maybe that's too harsh, because even the Second Amendment had a clause. The exact statement is this: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well-regulated, it says. Not, let any lunatic get assault weapons and kill children. Not, let's avoid background checks because some dangerous people will be inconvenienced. Not, assault weapon companies are more important than human lives. For God's sake, every time a school shooting occurs, gun lobbies and their pocket politicians say the very same things. That regulation would infringe on the right to bear arms, that the only counter to bad people with guns is good people with guns, that more guns are the solution. There are already more guns than citizens in the US. When will these dumb theories start working? The answer is never. The point is, this rhetoric by gun enthusiasts, loonies, whatever you want to call them, it works. Even this horrific shooting will end up increasing gun sales in America. Ordinary Americans will arm themselves for defense, and the gun lobby wins. The lives of children be damned. Joe Biden is once again trying to do something.
You know, the shooter in this situation reportedly had 2 assault weapons and a pistol, 2 AK-47. So I call on Congress again to pass my assault weapons ban. It's about time that we began to make some more progress, but there's more to learn. But I just wanted to send my concern and hearts out to so many parents out there.
This is no revolutionary new step. Biden is trying to bring back an old reform that lapsed in 2004. That's when the assault rifle makers started hawking their death machines about again. And they've, of course, had political patronage. This is last year's Christmas card by Nashville's Congress representative. What else can you expect when politicians depend on the gun lobby to get elected if Americans really want any change? If they want to save their children, if they want to save the soul of their nation, as they put it, they need to find politicians with pictures like this and vote them out. If not, the number of mass school shootings will continue to rise. And which makes us wonder, what can the rest of the world do? Build pressure, perhaps. It's not just Americans dying due to guns. Here's a thought. Maybe it's time India issued a travel advisory for its citizens in the US. Because Indians and everyone else is at risk from US gun terror. And the US would have done the same thing with one such shooting in any of the third world countries. There's a lot happening with Taiwan. Honduras succumbed to Chinese pressure and snapped ties with Taiwan. We told you about it. It happened on Sunday. And almost immediately, Taipei got an opportunity to flex its ties with a European country. Meanwhile, Taiwan's former president is in China. He says it's a dream come true for him. And all of this is happening as a national election approaches. The next election is a very crucial one. It could change Taiwan's fate forever. Will China hawks like Tsai be able to retain power, or will the pro-China Kuomintang make a comeback? Our next report explores. It's been a busy 2 days in Taiwan's capital. A big Czech delegation landed in Taipei over the weekend. This is the Speaker of the Czech Republic's lower chamber in Parliament. And she's the one who led the 150-person delegation to Taiwan. The delegation had government officials, business leaders, and academics. And they all meant business. While praising her country's ties with Taiwan, the Czech leader also took a subtle dig at China.
The Czech Republic and Taiwan have traditionally been close partners. The Czech representative office in Taiwan will celebrate 30 years of operation this year in November. Our Taiwan policies have been long-term and stable. We believe in the same values and principles. Among them, the most important are freedom, democracy, and protection of human rights. Nobody can threaten us from adhering to these rights.
The Czech leader assured Taiwan that her country will stand by the island nation come what may. She said, and I quote, "Developing freedom and democracy is our responsibility. I guarantee you, we are with you now. We will continue to be with you, and under any circumstances, we are in the same boat together." The Czech Republic and Taiwan are looking to strengthen trade and economic ties. Taiwan is also looking to invest in the Czech Republic, especially in semiconductors and electric vehicles. And China doesn't like any of it. It has objected to the Czech speaker's visit, just like it objected when the new Czech president dialed Tsai Ing-wen in January. But the Czech Republic is not the only one cozying up to Taiwan. There is a clear pro-Taiwan trend across Eastern Europe. Take Lithuania, for instance. It has angered China on several occasions. First, it criticized China's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. It also withdrew from China's 17+1 initiative, which aims to strengthen Beijing's ties with Central and Eastern European countries. Then it allowed a de facto embassy called the Taiwan Representative Office to be opened in its capital. And finally, it accused Chinese smartphone makers of equipping their products with spyware. The pandemic proved to be a turning point. Apart from the Czech Republic and Lithuania, Poland and Slovakia donated COVID-19 vaccines to Taiwan. And in 2021, representatives from these European countries, including Estonia, gathered in Taipei for a summit. Now, while Central European countries are ditching China and standing up for Taiwan, there is a front within Taiwan that likes to toe China's line. Taiwan's former president, Ma Ying-jeou, is in China. He's the first person who served as Taiwan's president to visit mainland China since 1949. And he belongs to Taiwan's Kuomintang, which is largely seen as a pro-China party. Soon after landing, he made some sweeping remarks.
People on both sides of the Taiwan Strait are Chinese people and are both descendants of the Yan and Yellow emperors. Today, many of the nation-building proposals held dear by the founding fathers of the country have been realized in Taiwan and the mainland.
People on both sides of the Taiwan Strait are Chinese people. The former president's fascination with China is quite evident. Taiwan's general elections are less than a year away, and Tsai Ing-wen's party seems to be losing ground. Kuomintang posted a strong performance in local elections last year, winning several seats in Taiwan's cities and councils. The party wants to build on that. Last month, several Kuomintang leaders visited China. They even held meetings with high-ranking Communist Party officials. The party thinks that having links with Beijing will help it win the upcoming general election. Tsai Ing-wen is not eligible to run for president again. Her Democratic Progressive Party will need another presidential face. So while Taiwan rightly focuses on forging international partnerships, it also needs to put up a brave fight against China and its proxies back home. At the risk of slightly confusing you, let me say that our next story is about something worth dying for. And I mean it literally. But don't worry, it doesn't happen in real life. I'm talking about virtual death. Now, death has haunted the human race for as long as there's been life on this planet. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about ghosts and such. I'm speaking in a philosophical sense. Death is one of the world's greatest mysteries. We don't want to die, but we want to talk about it. We want to understand how it may feel. And for everything science has managed to achieve, it hasn't really told us what happens when we die. It's a scary thought. Can you see death before you die? Apparently you can, thanks to virtual reality. And the creators are dead serious about their offering. They give you an immersive near-death experience. It's been developed by an artist named Shuan Gladwell. It uses extended reality. This is basically technology. It mirrors the physical world with a digital twin world. And the two are apparently able to interact with each other. This is a virtual death simulator. You have to lie on a replica hospital bed. You put on your extended reality headset, and then you're given a cardiac arrest. It sounds insane, but clearly it has takers. You'll see doctors hover over you, trying to revive you, but you're supposed to die. So the doctors obviously fail. Soon you have an out-of-body experience. Your supposed soul leaves the body and floats above. What's the point of all of this? It's being sold as a foretaste of your final moments. It's been called both meditative and unsettling. I think we'll settle for the second description. It's definitely unsettling. Also, it's not the first such experiment. And reports say people are dying to give it a shot. You may ask why. We are told it can lift your spirits, give you a whole new perspective on life. Virtual reality has also helped hospice workers to understand the end of life better. How does that work? They see the world through the eyes of their patients. It is said to make them more empathetic. Virtual reality is being used to reunite people with their lost loved ones. The experience may be virtual. The grief, we believe, is real. One wonders if it makes closure that much more difficult. And then there's something called mind uploading. It's where your mental essence can be digitally duplicated. It's still work in progress, but who knows, maybe it can expand the human experience, create a virtual afterlife, or make your memories live beyond you. It reminds me of Dumbledore, you know, the wizard from Harry Potter. He collected the memories, his memories, in the magical pensieve. That was fiction. But reality is catching up fast because a lot of what we're talking about sounds more like magic than science. And there are giant leaps. These are giant leaps for technology, no doubt. But they're also a little frightening. Is technology crossing the barrier between life and death? Does mixing virtual reality with death really help? Here's what research says. Near-death experiences transform people. They fear death a little less. They appreciate life a little more. Perhaps practicing death would do the same. And while the tools may be new, the concept is not. Across time and cultures, humans have prepared themselves for the inevitable end. We'd like to know what you think about this. And now we have news from the moon. It has water, but that's old news. Here's what's new. There's billions of tons of water on the moon. It is trapped in tiny glass beads. It could be extracted by astronauts on future missions. Does this mean we are one step closer to life on moon? Humans have been talking about building bases on the moon, tapping into sources of hydrogen and oxygen, exploring other precious resources. Science fiction is blurring into reality, and it's yet another breakthrough for science. Here's a report. Scientists have found a new reservoir of water on the moon, and this could be a game changer for mankind. We're talking about billions of tons of water, 279 billion tons to be specific. It is trapped in tiny glass beads spread across the lunar surface. Scientists say it can produce drinking water, breathable air, and even rocket fuel. This is one of the most exciting discoveries in the field. It helps us understand our nearest neighbor better and in a sustainable fashion. It also opens up countless avenues for research. Once this water is extracted, astronauts can use it on future lunar missions. The moon can be a habitat for space missions. Astronauts can also build bases on the moon, which they will use to head further into the solar system, something like a base for the mission to Mars. But this information does not come as a surprise. There have already been hints that the moon is not a wasteland. In 1990, NASA found evidence of frozen water. It was in craters near the moon's poles. In 2009, India took the next big step with the Chandrayaan-1 spacecraft. It spotted a thin layer of water on the surface. But for years now, scientists have wondered how water is stored on the moon, especially in regions outside the poles. Now, a team of Chinese scientists has the answer. They analyzed lunar soil samples, which they brought to Earth in 2020. The soil has fine glass beads. They're all smaller than a millimeter. They're formed when meteoroids slam into the moon and send up showers of molten droplets. These then solidify and mix into moon dust. With this research, it becomes much easier to extract the water. It is not lurking in deep craters anymore, which limited its extraction. The water may be everywhere, but remember, you can't just shake the soil to get the water out. The temperature needs to be increased above 100 degrees. And that's when water can be harvested. The study also confirms that there is a water cycle on the moon, and that the moon doesn't just have water, but also oxygen and hydrogen. This discovery completely expands the potential for exploring the moon, which space agencies are itching to do. It has been about half a century since humans last walked on the moon. Now NASA is preparing for a return in 2025. They want to put astronauts on the moon. So does China. They want to do it by 2030. Meanwhile, a European space agency wants to build a moon village. Others also want to create off-world bases. This research brings them all a step closer to their plans. But for these dreams to come true, many challenges have to be overcome. How can this water be gathered in a sustainable fashion? Who will do it, and how will the water be used? Research is underway, and with growing international interest, it won't be long before these questions are answered. But for now, this discovery itself has been a giant leap for mankind. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Israel. People took the protest against judicial reforms in Israel to the depths of the Red Sea. This was right before Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suspended the proposal. Meanwhile, eastern Spain is burning. Wildfires have destroyed thousands of hectares of land. The Spanish Prime Minister said the climate emergency is already hitting the country. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, 9 miners unexpectedly popped out of a collapsed gold mine. Mining incidents are common in this Central African country. And finally, what happened today in history? America's worst nuclear accident. The year was 1979. 3 Mile Island power plant in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania faced a malfunction. It led to a partial meltdown and radioactive leak. Fortunately, no deaths were reported, but it took 12 years and almost $800 million to repair the damage. The power plant was finally shut down in the year 2019. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Mismanaged vaccination drive, broken healthcare systems, citizens taking matters into their own hands. India's failure in managing the COVID-19 crisis is staggering.
Want stories but without the West spin on it? Presenting Vantage with me, Palki Sharma, a first-of-its-kind global show with an Indian perspective.
Indian becoming a UK PM.
Well, it's not like that we are going to get the Kohinoor back. But at least India is on its way to the top, huh?
But Gautam sir, there's actually not much to celebrate.
Why not? An Indian is ruling the UK.
Indian leaders in third countries often tend to overcompensate for their minority handicap.
Key.
For example, Sunak's Home Secretary of Indian origin, Suella Braverman, disapproved of India-UK free trade because it would encourage people immigrating to the UK, and the majority of whom were Indians. Structurally, India and UK have passed baggage, but still hasn't been resolved. And that is why,
ladies and gentlemen, India needs to significantly temper its expectations from Rishi Sunak. Presenting Vantage with me, Palki Sharma, a first-of-its-kind global show with an Indian perspective.